Hello. Hello, everyone. How are the audio's levels? Can everyone hear well?
This is Aster. Can you guys hear me as well?
Audios are levels. Thank you, Mr. C. Whitman, 4112. 4112? 412. Numbers are hard. Uh,
Isn't this whole stream about numbers?
yeah. Yeah. It's about low caps. Low caps. We all love our high caps. We all love our medium caps. We all love our low caps. So as we were trying to come up with what to do for today. We had a bunch of ideas. We still want to do that roster doctor. I've graciously submitted my roster to do roster doctor on, and Aster is gonna play the doctor. But before he prescribes what to do, let's start going through some of these low cap info. So,
Okay.
Aster.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at the daily open low cap, and um, we're just going to kind of do a refresher on some of the things we've talked about in terms of what we do before we start building a roster, and then we're going to look at my alts roster from the daily open low cap that has done well in that format recently without a lot of the elite cards that you would think you would might want or need for that format. So let's start. Daily open low cap. It's a 1500 cap. It's modern settings with a DH. So just as an initial thought, you know that you're going to need a full complement of pitchers. And it's going to be kind of the standard run environment that we're used to for open tournaments. Um, and then the cap number is 7.67, which is one of the tightest caps in any of the formats. The average card value, I believe, is between 57 and 58. So really going to have to make a lot of hard choices in this format. So that was step one, analyzing the format, and then looking at the options of stars and scrubs versus spread the wealth. Clearly, just the how tight the cap is forces you to go more spread the wealth. If you just think about it, if you're only going with 700 players and then planning on distributing the rest of your points among the other 19 players that all have to play a role, you're going to have a lot of just really weak spots in your lineup. You're going to have weak spots in your rotation. You're only going to have no real bullpen. That just doesn't really work. So, you really have to kind of change your focus from a standard, cap tournament that's got some room to work with. That for a low cap, especially this low of a cap, you really need to think about trying to find players somewhere in the middle that really deliver above what their overall number is in order to get production at a lot of different spots. Now, with regard to this particular team's low cap strategy, this is my alt. I've completed the build lineups with this team. I think I maybe have one tournament SE. I don't have any LE cards. Um, and so it's fairly limited in terms of options. I've picked up a few cheap cards or at various points to try and fit into tournaments, but this tournament doesn't play any of the weeklies and only plays the weekly perfect drafts, so just doesn't have a lot of opportunities to pick up tournament edition cards, and certainly isn't accumulating the points to really start buying them. We're going to look at the roster now, and there are definitely a lot of, kind of. Oh, actually,
Do,
I apologize. We switch that up. I'm gonna turn it over to Exto to just kind of show us the basic stats from the last about week or so's daily open low caps to see what players play and who's being used and how they perform. So Exton, why don't you take over, and then we'll look at the roster.
Yep. I cried a little inside when you said that Stars and Scrubs wouldn't work for this format, because I think that's my favorite way of roster building, and as you can see from the top 10 starting pitchers by innings pitched, sorted by the WOBA, you got some stars at the top. You got Vida, you got Bullet Joe, you got Jerry, you got Brown, and then we kind of people have kind of, I don't want to say it's like a solved format, but people kind of know who they're playing. We got All Star Kevin Brown, Gold Kevin Brown, who up until I think Build a Legend 2 was pretty much a cap requirement. And then you got, interestingly, Double Duty. I don't think I've ran him in caps recently. And then you got the two, great workhorses at the back end, Jesse Tannehill and Eddie Plank. In terms, so what do you have to say about kind of this distribution?
So, I think that to a large extent, these are the cards that, most everybody who's playing the daily tournaments has, in the volume that we're gonna, that we're gonna see the numbers. They're not necessarily the best options, but certainly, I think as a starting point, if you're building a pretty much any cap roster, you probably want some version of Kevin Brown. It's interesting that two different versions of him make the top 10 here. I think that the 100 Kevin Brown is certainly a good option. There are better starting pitchers than him. If you're starting three or four 100 pitchers, I don't know that he would be my choice unless that's your best option. And quite honestly, if that was your best option, I'd probably think about dropping down to the 87 Kevin Brown and using those points elsewhere. Beyond that, I think that the reason why we're seeing those guys is more as the degree to which I think a lot of people are using. I mean, the fact that only Bullet Joe has that massive number of innings pitched, I think you're seeing a lot of people using a lot of different mid-level, low diamond, gold, silver, and even bronze and iron guys. And so there's probably a lot of innings being pitched by a wide variety of different pitchers, especially in like the 4 and 5 spots in the lineup. Most lineups, it looks like, is going with Bullet Joe Rogan, not necessarily as the ace, but certainly that seems to be a pretty ubiquitous pitcher, and I presume also DH or maybe starting in another spot in the lineup. And with a low cap, that's hugely important. I think my first ever build this year for low cap, maybe not my first ever because Bullet Joe Rogan didn't exist yet, but pretty early on, I had Bullet Joe Rogan and 4 other two-way players. I had Double Duty, I had Nixie Callahan, and Mike Smith, and it was kind of a mess. It was really hard you basically had to kind of manage it manually as the tournament was ongoing, which didn't happen to be around when the tournament was running. It just didn't work very well, but it was just kind of fun to have that many two-way players trying to, kind of overlap. And when one guy was pitching, the other guy was, covering different defensive spots. But that, there's really not at this point that many good two-way players that have, a playable bat above that level. So,
What I'm surprised to see is that the 61 Kevin Brown isn't on here. I feel like going from Tannehill at 57 to Brown at 61, I would have thought that a lot of people would make that trade off, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's used a lot, but just didn't quite break the top 10. Almost everybody on that list. The only guy that really, I guess, surprised me a little bit was I didn't think that many people were doing still using double duty, but he makes sense given his two-way, and he's really not that far behind the low gold or high silver pitchers that you'd be considering using. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that much.
Okay, on to relief pitchers. So this is, pretty justifiably, a lot of people appear to kind of punt on their bullpen. It's anchored by, the who's who of MLB Live relievers. But the top spot in terms of WOBA against, you got Eddie Plank kind of shutting things down, and Gary Lucas, who both are starting pitchers, and I guess can we see if he gets any much of a bump in terms of K per nine, 5.98. Eddie Plank with the 0.3 K per nine boost, presumably in the closer role. I don't know if you have anything. I guess the new thing is Joe Black. When he dropped, I think a lot of us were pretty excited to see kind of like a high stamina, decent compliment, I guess, to Eddie Plank. And yeah, he's being used and doing some pretty heavy lifting in I know my bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Joe Black is probably the indispensable card in the bullpen for this format. Plank, some people might use in the bullpen in the starting, as their fifth starter, and probably belongs somewhere in your, on your team, whether that's as the fifth starter or in the bullpen. Gary Lucas kind of always is a good cap option. You really don't kind of have the room to go much higher than 50. There's a few other guys that I don't see on this list, but I would seriously consider. Alexander Wells is a 42 overall, who's got a decent profile for 42. Bailey Falter is a live card that's I think a 47 that has a nice profile. There's a few other guys, but pretty much the top three guys in this list I think are the if you're going to spend any money at all. I like those. There's a 41 live. I can't think of his first name. His last name is Naily.
James Nail.
James. Okay.
Yeah.
So he'd probably be on my list above some of these 40 overalls. That I think that 1 point is worth it to get an upgrade over some of these guys that you can see just obviously, it's not a ton of innings. We're looking at 400 or 500 innings, but I think that's probably a pretty close approximation of what you're going to get out of some of those weaker 40 overalls.
All right, let's go on to top 5 batters by position. So bear with me. I had to kind of jam this all in onto one. But just kind of looking around, catcher, no real surprises. First base, it looks like if you have Lou Gehrig, you are probably playing low cap. And then if you need a Lou Gehrig clone, Willie McCovey does a pretty good job. Third base, Eddie Matthews is pretty good, and I guess considering what you get compared to Brooks is pretty good. Pretty good stuff right there. Also, if you have Jackie, you're running him. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important to think about with this is that obviously if you have those guys, you'd love to play Gehrig and Jackie and and Hank. But the nature of that type of a cap, you're just not going to be able to do that. Maybe you can fit, if you're doing Butch or Rogan both ways, you maybe fit one or two other 100 hitters. But really that's it. So one of the things I think is interesting, looking at this list, and we'll look at the the other hitting spots is that McCovey, Gehrig just look like they're in a league of their own in terms of offensive production. And I think that most teams have McCovey, and then if you have Gehrig, obviously I think he's a must use. But those two guys just look like they are so far and above and beyond, and be hard to pass those up.
Yeah, and just kind of finishing up second base and left field, you kind of see Joe Morgan actually with a slightly better WOBA than Jackie. I'm guessing because of the prevalence of not a lot of people are playing Royce, more people are playing Bullet Joe or Kevin Brown. I guess if we come back to this slide, uh, you know, I can't do the math right now, but that looks like 20-30% is just Bullet Joe Rogan. So having Joe Morgan, I'm not quite sure how Joe Morgan's VR splits compare to Jackie's, but that's probably why Joe Morgan is slightly above Mr. Robinson, and
Sure.
that Hank
That makes
Aaron
sense.
and Rocky Colavito. Rocky still, I'm glad I have a Rocky. I don't play him enough. When I've been doing my modeling, he hasn't been grading out as well. But when I looked at observed, he always is kind of still up there.
Sure.
And then yeah, just the top five by plate appearance is this last one at the bottom here. You got Hank, you got Bullet Joe, everyone's running Elmer Smith and Cavaretta and Richardson, which are just kind of ridiculously good value bats that are still, even Bobby Richardson, who's a 42, right,
Yeah.
is still 25% less than average. But when you have kind of like Lou Gehrig and McCovey, that with a WRC plus close to 200, 25% less than average is pretty good. Okay, now let's look at your team.
Okay. So, as PJ Sleaze mentioned, I have Ozzy as my shortstop, and I have Don Money at second base. Easily could have gone with Grantham there, and I think is the same overall. Um, Actually, thinking about it now, I'm not quite sure. I usually play Grantham more, but um, one of the things I have Hank in left field. I probably, looking at those numbers, might make the adjustment and get McCovey in there, and then go with um, uh, you know move Cavaretta to right to. Well, I guess I can't. I'd have to figure it out. I'm not sure if I take Hank Aaron out of the outfield. I'm not sure if there's a cheap option, to kind of to punt an outfield spot. I've already got. I guess I could go Elmer Smith or Bob Fothergill in the outfield, and then put Cavaretta at DH. Um, but that would be an adjustment I would consider making just to see how much bigger of an improvement the bat is from McCovey versus Hank Aaron. Um, the Stanton is in right field is the 93, um, who I just think in almost every format just hits above his weight. And then I've got Elmer Smith at DH. I've got Andy Pafko at third base, and can play a lot of positions. Joe Kelly is my center fielder, and then as I said, Cavaretta at first and Bubbles at catcher. So I'm pretty much going. Not quite. One of the things that's interesting this year is it's almost not quite stars and scrubs, because there's several positions where the guy doesn't have a very high overall, but he's not really a scrub. I mean, Bubbles Hargrave you know, is not a great defensive catcher, and he obviously is not the bat that that a 100 overall would be. But for a 48 overall, that's a pretty solid bat. And I don't really feel like I'm truly punting the position to play Bubbles at catcher. Same thing with Cavaretta at first. Another thing, if I wanted to upgrade another position, I easily could have gone with Bobby Richardson instead of Don Money. And then use those points someplace else, maybe to upgrade to a first baseman like Bob Bailey, or if I had him, John Kruk or Edgar Martinez or something like that. So there's definitely one of those things is you kind of have to think about where are the spots that you're going to have to punt some hitting spots in a low cap, and it's really about thinking about where are the spots where I don't hurt myself by punting. There are some that I think you do hurt yourself by punting. There's just not some great options. But pretty much every position at this point has somebody. Third base would be one where I'm not really sure who I would go with if I was going below like a bronze level. I don't really think. I guess Zeal at 48, but I just feel like he doesn't play up the way some of these other guys do. And so, there are some positions where I think you obviously want to have some elite bats in your lineup. And so you find the spots. I don't have a lot of kind of elite intermediate bats on this team. So, I make use of guys like Pafko and Stanton that, kind of most everybody has that, I think can, produce for that overall number.
Yeah, one thing that I see is just Joe Kelly. I know this is just one tournament, but it didn't seem like he really produced well, and I think he's an okay center fielder, but
yeah,
it
and
depends.
that was that. It's definitely a situation where that would be an easy spot to make an adjustment. I don't really, again, talking about spots to punt. I don't really want to do a full punt at center field. I really don't like the. I mean, I guess I could go down to like I think it's FP Santangelo is a 48. So that might be a spot where I actually look to downgrade somewhere to open up some points and try and move up to. I like a lot better. There's some guys in the 70s. To go up to like McTammany or Lloyd Mosby or somebody like that kind of has a little bit more value for the spot if I can open up some points. So that might be something I look at.
What about Lieber, or is his defense way too low?
I definitely could see using Lieber at DH in this format and him being productive. Maybe taking Smith out of the lineup. I only need 8 points to move up to Lieber, so I could probably find a way to do that pretty easily. And then use him at DH. But for in center field, I think I don't know. I'd feel uncomfortable with downgrading that far in center field defense. I generally think of it in a lot of tournaments as just like have sort of a minimum number that I won't go below. Shortstop is probably a high, or in second base it's probably a higher number. Center field is probably something in the 60s. I think that's what Joe Kelly is. But to go down to, I think Lieber's like a 45 or 46 defense. That would make me nervous. And so I think but I do think he'd be a serious candidate to fit in a DH at a not quite a full punt, but like a semi punt, and get some good production there.
Let's go to your pitching.
Okay.
So take us.
Okay. So one of the things you probably may have already noticed this when I showed my hitters, but I don't have Bullet Joe Rogan, as my as one of my starting pitchers, or obviously as my DH. I pretty much went, gold and silver for my top four starters, and then Plank um, as the fifth starter, and that allowed me to kind of use a few more stronger bats. Now, I do think if you have Bullet Joe Rogan, you should use him. I actually think I acquired him on this team in the last week, but didn't update the roster to do so. After this conversation, I'll probably update the roster in the next couple days, and probably maybe might work on it this week or maybe after the live update. But I think I think probably I would use Bullet Joe Rogan. I just think it opens up a lot of flexibility. That way I'd be able to take out one of those gold pitchers and then that would be a better DH than somebody like Elmer Smith. Significant upgrade. And then have to probably pick up. I need to adjust a few points here or there to make that work, but I think that would make the most sense. Um, and then in terms of the starters, I went with guys. That's the 87 Kevin Brown. I feel like he's kind of sort of a must. The closest thing I would say to a must. In terms of gold, I think there's uh, there's a lot of options. I think Jake Arrieta, um, pretty much any of the Negro League starting pitchers, Slim Jones, Foster. I think Double Duty would be, a solid option for gold. For silver, I went with Santana and Busby because that's who I had. Both of them pitch phenomenally well. Obviously, if you have a Hubble, I would think he would slot in here. Um,
Harshman.
but I think Harshman, Ramos, um, I definitely is it Larry Jensen? Um,
He's a gold, I think.
no, I thought that
No,
was a silver.
Larry Jansen. I don't remember. There's there's a Platinum Series 2, Jose De Leon.
Yes,
He's
that would be a good card for one of these spots as well. And then for the bullpen, um, I
Frank Larry. That's the guy,
yeah,
right?
he's a gold.
Yeah.
I would definitely Larry's a guy I would consider. Um, um, Probably not Larry Sorensen. That I feel like he's like his stuff is under 30 if I remember correctly, and I just generally avoid anybody with under 50 stuff in a format like this. Um, and then for the bullpen, pretty much the standard names. One thing, just I noticed this. I don't quite know why. This was either a mistake on my part in setting it up the last time I modified it. But generally speaking, I like to have anybody that I think is a better um, relief pitcher. So in this case, Joe Black and Gary Lucas. I would want them both listed as stoppers um, instead of just all being mid relief. As you can see, they ended up, you know, pitching the AI recognized that they were better and pitched them um, I guess most and third most. But if you put them both at stopper, one they get higher leverage innings, but also they tend to get more innings than everybody else. And so uh, I would just think that I think that's a better deployment.
If you watched last week's video about setting up your views, we could see the pitch leverage if you had that, and then you can kind of see where Joe Black and Gary Lucas were deployed compared to some of the other relievers.
Well, I did set that up after watching your stream earlier this week, so I can do that. However, this is a slide of my team, so I can't show everybody that now. Uh,
Right.
but
Um,
I appreciate that because I definitely will do that when we're done.
Sweet. So this was basically part one. You won with this roster, right?
Yeah, so this roster in the last week won once, made the semifinals once, and made the quarterfinals once. Um, which, considering that it doesn't have Full Joe Rogan, doesn't have any SE or LE cards, I really, I have to chalk it up that one, obviously, just you know, the RNG was in my favor this week, but also just kind of a good kind of spread the wealth. Tried to get like a solid, if not spectacular, player at just about every position, utilizing my knowledge of the lower level guys to make sure that I had solid people throughout the lineup to at least give some production.
So we have a weekly that's similar to this, right?
Yes, we have I think Nico's name for it is the Saturday overnight under the covers cap, which, like a lot of the tournaments this year, has a very long name. We're going to go with Open 1625 cap, I think is the better way to describe it.
So this is just me pulling some data from the overnight under the covers cap and just kind of going back to the previous streams where, um, just how does modern era compare to the 1962 era? And apparently, there's more strikeouts, more walks, more home runs, a little bit more runs, but less BABIP. So I guess we should have taken the slide from uh, the one that everyone has screenshotted and put it up here. Uh, do you know offhand what 1962 era is?
Uh, in terms of like pitcher usage,
Yeah.
so you need five starting pitchers, um, but they're going to pitch if you don't put a pitch count on them, they could easily go 160 or more pitches and still be ready for their next start. Um, and then obviously because of that, you don't really need a ton of bullpen, um, and you can get away with five, maybe six bullpen rooms, and certainly in a cap format, you really don't need to spend much money at all. Um, on those guys. So that's the basic. I think that's what's on the slide, if I remember.
Yeah. The interestingly enough, the WOBA is the same between the two, but I think one is fueled by just more like a better BABIP, and one is fueled by more home runs. Uh, so yeah. So with the kind of analyzing a bit of the format, let's talk more about under overnight under the covers cap.
Okay, so as I said, it's a 1625 cap, and Seawit is correct. It was 1750 without an error setting. When they made the adjustments a few weeks ago, they added a 1962 error setting. It does have a DH. That is a cap number of 9.75, which, if you guys remember from the previous, when we were talking about the daily open low cap, was 7.67. So this has a little bit more of a cap, and because you don't really need the bullpen, it kind of gives you a little bit more. You have a little bit more flexibility, but basically you're looking at uh, two more um, you know two more full spots that you could use. And actually, you want to show them the stats for over the overnight under the covers?
Yeah. So this is
Oh, and actually, I'll be right back.
okay. Sounds good. Uh, Let me take you down stat lane. Um, as Astor was saying, because there's no bullpen, you can kind of see a little bit more usage of 100s. Someone who's lucky enough to have a Pedro Martinez and I guess doesn't play the daily uh, was definitely running Pedro out there. In the weekly, so yeah, this is for the past 4 weeks. Comparing that to the uh, daily under the covers, or the daily low cap, you just kind of see in general kind of, I want to say, more dependency on the starting pitchers, or on kind of those high end starting pitchers, and uh, I guess more people are kind of trying to jam in that fourth 100. In terms of relief pitchers, it's pretty much the same. I could have probably copy and pasted this slide, so I'll just edit this live. OUTC. Just you can kind of see that the reliever usage is pretty identical. People have, like, other than the ones that we've talked about, where you got Nail, you got um, who else is there? The Alexander Wells. People just love stuffing their bullpens with 40s, but you can kind of see um, the runs allowed per nine quickly escalates to reaching 10 runs per nine. Where I guess if we go and look back at here, um, the relievers in the daily appear to kind of cap out, I guess, at around 7 runs per nine, but in the overnight under the covers, yeah, some bullpens get blown up. When looking at kind of batters by position, we get a little slightly different distribution again, because the relievers don't get quite used as often. You're able to kind of sneak in a King Kelly. You're able to sneak in an Edgar Martinez. Donnie Bush, apparently everyone loves to play. That's a bit surprising to me. The Lou Gehrig, Willie McCovey gap gets a little larger. 199 WRC plus versus a 180 WRC plus. Ken Griffey, people love running him. I guess the people who have Ken Griffey don't quite play the daily, because I feel like I recently purchased a Ken Griffey, and will play, or if I was gonna play him, I'd probably play him in the daily low cap. Yeah, Gabby Cravath, you see a bit of him, but Hank is still kind of dominating the outfield. And as we kind of round it out, Joe Morgan and Jackie Robinson. Yeah, maybe you don't need Jackie, but I guess if we go back here, you still see, uh, I guess it's kind of evenly. Everyone's still running Bullet Joe Rogan, but a lot more Jerry Royce, a lot more Vita Blue in terms of the usage. But I think people are kind of supplementing their third and fourth and fifth starter with maybe a Jim McCormick, with maybe the gold Kevin Brown, or double duty. So I still think the value of Morgan over Jackie is pretty real. And then uh, in addition, I guess some of the cards don't quite play the same in the 1962 era. Um, like, you still have Babe Ruth crushing it. You still have Greg Luzinski, who I feel is a card that doesn't get played enough. Still with a positive WRC plus. And
So I'm back.
welcome back. Just finishing
Thank
up.
you.
Just finishing up the batters.
Sure. I caught the last little bit of that, so I just wanted to interject two things. One, I thought it was interesting to see that clearly, as a group, the players of this tournament have kind of, for the most part, picked shortstop as a position to punt. Very few of the top options at shortstop showed up on that list, and so I thought it was interesting that most of the at bats are by Ozzie and Donnie Bush, JJ Hardy, and then all the way down to Mike Benjamin getting the most at bat. Um, There's certainly part of that is that there aren't a lot of great perfect shortstops or even diamond shortstops, and so it feels like it's a good spot to punt, and especially to punt all the way to Mike Benjamin at a 41 overall and get 97 range, is pretty unbelievable for um, for a 41 overall, and it gives you an opportunity to get a few more of these top bats in. Um,
People seem to get really desperate because I think Lennon Sosa is a 40 and what Benjamin's a 41. So
yeah,
they're I'm surprised that many people don't have Mike Benjamin or Bike Benjamin, or they just really like Lennon Sosa instead.
and yeah. I mean, I guess Lennon Sosa, I think, plays a couple positions, so
Oh,
that might be a guy that everybody's using as a backup at multiple positions, and so he gets a lot of at bats there. Um, but yeah, I mean, Benjamin's pretty new, only being plat two card, so it might just be that people haven't you know sought him out, and but I would expect that his usage will go up. Um, I think most rosters probably have him, but there's probably not that many that are actually playing him at shortstop as their primary shortstop. I guess if a good number are given that plate appearance number, but um, yeah, Mr. Audit, Benjamin also plays second base, but I just wouldn't use him there. I think that if I'm gonna play him at, certainly if I'm using him as a backup, I'd play him both. But if I'm starting him, I'd start him at shortstop. Um, and then the other thing, when you showed the slide of 1962 versus the modern era baseline, the home runs per game went up 50%, and so I think that's why guys like Colavito, Lazinski, I wouldn't be surprised to see the 82 Hack Wilson, um, that was plat one, being really productive in this format just because of the increase in homers. Um, so if you're kind of looking to pick a guy, um, you know to fill out a spot, especially if you're looking kind of a mid-tier guy, there's a lot of good hitters. Lazinski's one, Bob Bailey, the 75, um, the new Jack Clark. Um, um, those would definitely be good options.
so uh, this is the I guess part one of the Under the Covers cap. Uh, we wanted to kind of look at a few rosters, so you want to do that. Do we want to go through my models first, or do we want to go through the two rosters first?
Um, why don't we go through the first two roster? Well, yeah. Why don't you go through your model first, and then we'll get to
Okay.
the rosters.
Okay. So, as anyone who's been watching, I've been meddling with models, and this is what I have for, I believe, the Under the Covers. Let me just double check. Yeah. So this is my model for FIP for the Under the Cover cap. Um, and I've liked it because even if it's wrong, it tells me to play cards that I would probably not play. Like a lot of these are kind of obvious and that I don't have them, but I guess the Hardware Heroes Randy Johnson, that's relatively new, but Bullet Joe Rogan, Jerry Royce, Hunter Kevin Brown, all kind of should have an expected FIP around the same. McCormick is kind of a tier below, and then for relievers, there's Mr. James Nail, who my relief pitcher FIP loves him. And then yeah, someone in chat I remember said Beatty. There's also Jose Cuas, and then Balanos, and I don't know. I feel like these are like a good list of good list of relievers for to fill out your bullpen, but you don't even need to pitch them very often. Um, for hitters, um, you know, it's kind of interesting. I don't have the WRC plus equivalent, but for Lou Gehrig, Willie McCovey, Williamson, there's Jack Clark that everyone is loving and adoring, and then you got Babe Ruth. There's the Ali Hack Wilson, so Mr. Audit. You can use him with confidence that I say he is probably going to do well in the format. Hugh Duffy, who's it, Seawit, if you want to sell Hugh Duffy to maybe get a Jack Clark. That'd be something. And yeah. And then this is one that's kind of interesting. The 81 Jack Clark is what is this? Probably like the 22nd best batter in the format. That card is kind of interesting. And then I just filtered it down to cards that I think I set the filter to like 65, I guess. And so Hamlin still does a lot of great work. Babe Ruth, let's not talk about that card. Carlos Santana, I've seen him around, and for being a 48 is great. The 62 Willie McCovey still does well, but then we're starting to kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel. Anything kind of pop out?
No, I mean, I think that one of the things is that, in terms of how you sort for this, I don't know. Obviously, I don't know how we do it in terms of XWOBA, but I'd almost want to have something where we're dividing, the production by the amount of cap points. That's something maybe we should think about, kind of a way to do that, because for caps, for an open tournament, obviously, that's a pretty good list, and you can see, who produces at each position. You don't really have to think about the overall, but for cap purposes, a guy like the 81 Jack Clark, stands out at that list of being by far the lowest, overall, and probably one of the better values, of the top batters. But it'd be nice if we had a way to calculate that. And maybe we have to use a different statistic than XWOBA, but we should think about that. That's probably a longer conversation off screen, so we can probably move on for now. But I think that might be something we should think about for future screens.
Yeah, previously we kind of looked at. I don't quite have it here, but previously I had Cap War and Cap Bat R, and I kind of
right. But you haven't really. Have you figured out a way to model and predict War?
No. I think that's foolish.
Okay. Well, so then I think maybe just looking at from the back, maybe we do expected batting runs and then divide that by the cap points to see if that kind of targets the best value guys. But that's something we can play with another time.
So I've like I said, I've been using these models to kind of guide my decision making, and in last Saturday's overnight under the covers cap, the two championship teams were the PGH Beaches and the Hudson Railers. So let's transition over to that. So if I hide this, you'll see my screen. Yep. So who do you want to talk about first? Hudson Railers or Beaches?
Let's start with the Beaches.
Okay. All right, you tell me what to do, and I'll do it.
Okay. So click on them, and then just go to their No, Mr. Audit won every tournament but this one. Um, so let's go to rosters. So, and then sort by overall. So that's a pretty textbook stars and scrub approach. He's got 7 perfect cards, uh, 2 diamond cards, and that Ken Griffey is, uh, essentially a perfect card masquerading in a 93 overall card. And then, we've got, one 57 overall pitcher, and then the rest are, um, pretty low irons. So just wanted to, highlight that, looking at the roster, it's usually one of the first things I look at when I'm looking at somebody's rosters, kind of how are they approaching the composition. Beaches have kind of traditionally been one of the very best managers in the game. So, if you look at that, that's a pretty clear, when Beaches was, building this roster, they were thinking a stars and scrub model. And, if we go through kind of, let's start with pitching. You want to go with their, shows their pitching rotation. So, we've got Vida Blue and Jerry Royce, which, to have two of the best pitchers be lefties, I think makes sense. They're just going to be, they're two of the best in the game. And then Bullet Joe, obviously, to have, be going both ways. And then, interestingly, Beaches chose to punt both the 4 and the 5 spot in the rotation, going with Eddie Plank and Floyd Yeomans. That worked, phenomenally well. If you look, Plank had a 2.58 ERA, and Yeomans was like 3.48. That's really solid. And that's kind of how you end up winning these. Is you've got, Plank's a very good option for a 47 overall, but you're not going to expect him to have the best ERA on your team. And then Yeomans is a really good new card that I think also will go above above that overall. But still, to get that kind of production, when you see somebody like Vida Blue, who's one of the better pitchers in the game, having a 4.55 ERA, and these guys being significantly better, that's that's just a little bit of the RNG going well. But that's what has to happen. When you punt the 4 and 5 spot, you also have the benefit of, even if they're not pitching that phenomenally well, you probably have some more points invested in the hitting lineup to cover for that. And then looking at the bullpen, really didn't spend many points at all in the bullpen. I think the only player that he spent any points on was Bergermeyer, who I have not seen a lot of people use, but looks like a solid, iron option at 48. And then most of the rest are kind of minimum guys.
Yeah, this Bergmeyer card, I guess if you're gonna come in and suppress home runs, 82, 93, 93 VL is pretty good.
Yeah.
79. Although I've seen cases where movement doesn't matter and you still give up 2 home runs per 9. But this is .7 through what was it, 27 and 2/3 innings pitched. That's pretty phenomenal. Um, Batters.
Okay.
So you want to look at VR lineup?
Sure.
Okay, let me just.
I mean, generally in a cap format like this, especially a fairly tight cap, I'm guessing the V lineup and the VL lineup is basically going to be the same.
Looks
Um,
like he swapped positions, but I think
okay, but it's the
everyone,
same guys, yeah.
yeah.
So, we were talking, you have more room in this kind of a cap to fit in a few more, elite bats. So you see, Jackie, King Kelly, Hank, the 99 Babe Ruth, which I think, given what we pointed out with the 50% increase in home runs, that Babe Ruth is a great play. Uh, Brooks, then the 93 Griffey, who's really pretty much a perfect. Um, and then Bullet Joe, DHing when he's not pitching, and then the two spots where he punted were Carlos Ruiz at catcher, and then Mike Benjamin um, at shortstop. So definitely that feels like a strong punt spot, especially if you're going full stars and scrubs. I think there's some kind of in between options for shortstop that you don't necessarily have to punt all the way, but I think the appearance of Mike Benjamin makes it a serious consideration. That it really just gives you, you think about it, just comparing the 69 Aussie that a lot of people play, going down to Benjamin, that gives you 27 points. You're obviously not expecting much offense, if any, but um, you want to show the actual stats to show what he got out of Benjamin for hitting wise?
Oh, uh, well, he is a 525 OPS, 36 OPS plus, 27 WRC plus.
Okay, so not much of anything, which we really wouldn't expect. Um, but you can always have a good tournament where a guy like that will will get a few more hits than usual and end up being not quite a detriment to your hitting, but you're going to bat him ninth, and he's hopefully not going to come up quite as much, and you can get away with it. But in a to get defense better than the 69 Aussie, and really as good as almost any shortstop available for a 41 is just kind of a no-brainer. And
Well,
then go
what
ahead.
one thing that I thought was kind of interesting because I looked at this depth chart and I immediately was confused because he had Aaron backing up all three outfield positions, and I'm thinking, well, if he's backing up all three outfield positions, doesn't that mean that Vinny Capra has to have plate appearances? However, when I sort by Vinny Capra, I realized that Vinny Capra only had 20 plate appearances and he played 9 games out of how many was it? Where turn the tree. How
So we
what
had
was his
four
record?
starts.
So it was out of 35. So the interesting part is that Aaron shifts from first base, and you get a much better hitter in Cavaretta, and you can see that Cavaretta had uh, 90 plate appearances in like 36 games, and even then, Cavaretta, had a 354 WOBA, and just throw up WRC plus on here. Uh, where did it go? Like Cavaretta did well. Like I almost want to say Cavaretta putting above average offense up for 3/4 what people, uh, 3/4 of the plate appearances. That was pretty big to come through.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with Seaward and Mr. Audit that this setup really benefited from that Beaches marched through this tournament and didn't take very many losses, um, and as a result got a lot of rest days, because looking at that setup, to have Aaron, I generally avoid ever having a situation where my starter at a particular position is the only backup available for that position. um, I just think that that's almost always going to cost you, unless you just really run through people and get lots of off days. Um, and so
He had 10
you
off
know
days.
right. So that would be a situation where especially there's no like great or even half decent, like 40 overall outfielders. But between 41 and 43, there's a couple of guys that you know can play passable defense at least in any of the outfield spots. And so I would have thought adding one or two of those. He had an open roster spot. He would have had to maybe drop down somewhere. He has Harry Danning as the third catcher at a 48. Maybe go down to like Aaron Sebia if he has him, or a Red Doohan, and then have some points to get an outfielder. Um, might not be a bad option.
Yeah, and you think about, I guess he's got Kelly shifting off of DH to back up Jackie, who's backing up Benjamin. He has Kelly backing up catcher. I guess he really just wanted to have the best bats in there the most, I guess.
Yeah, and hey, it worked. But I mean, to Burner guy's question, I don't know that it's always the best strategy for caps, especially for 128 team tournaments. It's pretty rare to avoid having a 7-game series at some point. Um, and so I was looking. I can't remember who it was, but somebody had a tournament this week where they went 7 in rounds 1 through 4, and then kind of coasted the rest of the way. And that suggests really solid roster distribution that got them through that they weren't ending those series and then just being, kind of, because, a 7-game series, that Aaron easily could be, in a bad spot, or the Griffey could be in a bad spot if the Aaron just, can't back up, all those positions. So, that I would try and find a couple of cap points to to just cover myself a little bit. I don't feel like that's like such a big you're still taking a big gamble by going heavily stars and shrubs, that I just look to have a little bit better distribution of the of those scrubs to cover a few more positions. But other than that, I really like this roster for this format. I think this is a good build. But that was the one thing that I noticed is you know you're really creating a possibility of, if you go multiple rounds, go 6 or 7 games, multiple rounds, you could really end up with some bad fatigue results.
Yeah, and even like getting a Kingman in would have helped instead of Danning for 2 more points if you could somehow figure that out. But yeah, is
Right.
definitely high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
Okay, the other team in this final, if I can get there, is the Hudson Railers. So let's take a look at their. So they played. So Hudson Railers played 42 games, and PGH Beaches played 35. So Hudson Railers played a full extra series
Mm.
than than
Yeah. So let's start with the roster again,
oh yeah
right next to it.
yeah. Finally got there.
Okay. So, we can see, a lot less 100 overalls, um, and spread out among, some gold and silver cards, one silver, and then a few more kind of higher level iron cards than what Beaches used. So not quite, you know, real spread, full on spread the wealth. But if you're thinking about it in terms of continuum, this is a good bit closer to spreading the wealth. Um, and so it's just an interesting comparison between the two rosters. And then I guess now we can go to the pitching.
go to the pitching view.
So, the only overlap between between the two starting rotations is obviously Bullet Joe Rogan. Not a big surprise there. Um, Went with with the Term Edition Red Donahue, the '87 Kevin Brown double duty, and then Melly Wolfgang. So, other than Bullet Joe Rogan, didn't go with any perfect pitchers, but didn't really punt any pitching spots. So, when looking at the comparison with matching up with Beaches, had pretty solid matchup uh, advantages over Floyd Yeomans and Eddie Plank, but as we can see, that double duty Redcliffe did not pitch well throughout the tournament, nor did Melly Wolfgang, which is really kind of impressive that the Hudson Railers advanced to the finals. I don't know how much of those runs we could, I guess, take a look were caused in the finals, but that's um, that's pretty surprising that they you rarely look at a team that made the finals and see two starting pitchers pitch that poorly in a good number of innings. So, uh, did let up a good amount of runs and start against the Beaches, but it looks like they were continually uh, getting hurt. Um,
Yeah, look at it was 23, 18, 17. He got better, but he got lit up pretty much in his first few starts, and it
yeah, so it's tough. It's a lot of you got a lot of things have to go right to win a weekly tournament, and one of the things that is nice to see is some things can go pretty wrong, and you can still make it to the finals of a tournament. But I think those were both solid choices for back of the rotation to still be pretty good players at a pretty good overall value. Um, I don't know if those would be the guys that that I would necessarily pick at around those overalls, but those would definitely be two guys I'd look at. Um, I think I would, trying to think with this. So with the increase in home runs, I wouldn't want to use any of the high guys that are in the in the 70s like Pedro Ramos or uh, Carl Hubble, but although Hubble somehow manages to get by, even though he doesn't have particularly,
dips and
um,
dots.
yeah. But definitely Wolfgang, I'm surprised got pummeled given the fact that he has pretty strong movement. Um, so that I think that's interesting. And then just looking very quickly at the bullpen, you can see not a lot of arms. Um, and Lucas, who we've talked about, um, and kind of the usual suspects with Plank and Lucas and Joe Black, um, and then as you can see, you don't really need a whole lot of options. Um, Chad Smith was clearly by far the worst of the five, and the AI just didn't use him at all. Um, and this bullpen usage is heavier than you would expect, mainly because Radcliffe and Wolfgang were getting shelled. So these guys were pitching a ton in mop-up duty, um, and that's unusual for this format. But it's just because those guys happen to get shelled. And then if you look, Bullet Joe pitched phenomenally. Red Donahue and Kevin Brown also pitched phenomenally. That's why you know Hudson Rail has made it this far. But even reasonable performance by those two pitchers at the bottom of the rotation, and Railers easily could have won it. And then
I want to say that it seems like to me that um, just because, like I was pointing out, like Joe Morgan and those left-handed bats. So I was looking up the double duty Radcliffe, and he kind of got spanked by Bo Jackson, who apparently the bronze has reverse reverse batting splits. I didn't realize that.
I didn't realize that either. I did not expect the name that you were going to throw at me there was that he got beat up by Bo Jackson. Um, Even if you told me it was a bronze card, I still wouldn't.
Yeah, and in his
Bo Jackson
first
would have not been one of my high guesses, but um,
his VR power is 96. So yeah, this
huh,
is this is the this is the way to. I guess he eventually lost to the Hudson Railers. I guess, but yeah, interesting.
okay. Well, you heard it here. Xtaforus says Bo Jackson is the best hitter in the game. Um, Go buy him, play him, and if he sucks, you can go find Xtaforus. He's somewhere in Canada.
Yeah, among the polar bears. Um, batting. So what are we looking at here?
Okay, so at the top we've got um, Garrick Brooks and Barry Larkin, which uh, if you have Garrick, obviously you're playing him. Larkin, I know Railers won 3 tournaments last week. I wouldn't be surprised if Larkin was the prize for one of them. Um, and then the '89 Pedro Guerrero obviously is a an elite bat that is only an '89 and plays a lot of positions. Um, Don Money, who we were talking about earlier, and then in terms of spots where he punted in the lineup, looks like catcher he went with Bubbles and Harry Danning, which makes sense. Um, and then Elmer Smith at DH, and went with Bullet Joe in right field, and then Strunk as a semi punt at center field, which I think Strunk has a little bit better center field defense. I think he's like a 77. And let's see, looks like you got decent production out of him. Yeah, not bad.
Average bat for a bronze.
Yeah, I mean, given the fact that um, uh, um, that there's a format that heavily boosts homers, I would probably look for somebody that had more home run power. Center field's kind of a tough spot for that, but I feel like Amos Otis has pretty decent power, not quite as good a defense. Might be a better fit for the format. Um, but I've always liked Strunk and tried to figure out ways to fit him into things, um, especially formats where power doesn't play up as much.
Right. Um, Interestingly, between Double Duty, Danning, and Bubbles, they each got about the same amount of plate appearances, which is kind of
Okay.
interesting. Uh, Bubbles got 65. Danning. Oh no, Danning as a starter got about as much as Double Duty and Bubbles. So I guess the strategy was he wanted to play Danning the most and then try to get as much time with Double Duty. It's a little. I guess Double Duty
Interesting.
was his backup DHVR as well, or at
Right.
least that was how it was last loaded.
Sure.
Because I was
One
kind
thing
of
that's interesting.
go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting playing Bullet Joe Rogan in right field and then having Pedro Guerrero, who's starting in left, and Elmer Smith, who's starting at DH, in front of him. I just worry with that the AI is going to get kind of lost. It's probably a slight downgrade defensively, but I would probably put Elmer Smith in right field, have Bullet Joe Rogan at DH, because that way, if Bullet Joe Rogan is unavailable, it just goes to Radcliffe. It doesn't have to bounce and move everybody around. Um, and then I think the same thing we were talking about with the beaches is that it feels like this roster is just missing a kind of utility outfielder that plays all three outfield positions and can kind of fill in here, because I don't. It feels like this is a little thin with double duty, being the backup DH and the backup center fielder, and playing at catcher. Just feels like a little bit much. And then Guerrero playing left field but backing up right field, and Elmer Smith, who's DH, also backing up right field. I just feel like that might be probably not to the degree that we saw with Beaches, having Aaron backing up all three and starting at first. But I think that that's something that I would make that kind of an adjustment.
Unless you subscribe to the tinfoil that less cards means the stats have to be distributed more to your cards.
Well, in that case, I just go with less bullpen arms, and have enough bats that I felt comfortable that I'd cover myself. Um, for the infield, having Blum there that plays four positions and covering all the infield spots as a third option at all those spots. That's the kind of thing where when you've got lots of extra roster spots to use for hitting because you don't need that many pitchers in a 1962 era setting. I kind of like. I would like to have a similar player that's a 42, 43 that covers Moniak or McDonald are the two guys that I generally use, but I think there's a couple guys that maybe only play two of those positions, but would help in this situation. We're ready for your roster?
And then let's go to my Breslau Binturongs.
So while you're going to that, I'm going to answer Mr. Otto's question. So, Mr. Otto, it's a theory. It is Xtaforce's theory. I have not seen anybody else espouse the theory. I haven't really seen, even anecdotally, that it necessarily works. But I've actually found kind of oddly that a couple of times my rosters got semi-borked, and I only ended up with like 24 players, but they were like the two players missing were actual like reasonably important guys, and tournament already started. I made some adjustments to at least somewhat cover for the fact that those guys were missing, and then the team did much better than expected, missing guys. So there's maybe something there, but my guess is it's just looking into the void of weird results and coming up with some crazy reason to ascribe to. Does that feel like a reasonable assessment, Exto?
Yeah. The idea is that when you see, like, this was mainly from like Perfect Draft, when like people forget to draft like an additional backup catcher or like a second shortstop or something like that, and you see a guy who's like has 0% fatigue, but they still bat above average, and my idea is that the stats have to get allocated by the engine, and I'm sure there's guardrails so that not so like the basically it has to get evenly distributed, and so there's a chance that your card gets the rolls, I guess, because it like you get more chances to get the rolls. I don't know. I don't know. I work in software development and I still don't know, but
well, it's fun to have a theory in any case.
So yeah, so this is my team. I also subscribe to kind of the stars and scrubs point of view. I had what was it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Decided to pay up for Kevin Brown, perfect Kevin Brown. Yeah. What else would you like me to talk about?
So I had a couple of things looking. I looked at your roster a little bit earlier. Let's start with pitching.
Sure. So I did not subscribe to the less is more theory. I ran 12 relievers even though I didn't have to. But got Bullet Joe, had him DHing, then had Royce, Kevin Brown, Zachary. So I kind of punted on SB4 and SB5. Not so much punting on with Zachary, but you know, with the thought that home runs are elevated, and Tom Zachary seems to be the type of guy who over 100 movement, both VR and VL. So I thought it was a good move.
Yeah, no, and looking at his profile, very similar to the Melly Wolfgang that Hudson Railers was using. I think that's a profile that should over time do fine in this format. Obviously didn't work out great here. Um, the only thing I wonder is with the strikeouts were also elevated, that maybe you can't get away with the 50 stuff guys as starters, that you maybe need to kind of think about looking for um, more balance. There's a lot of silver guys that are more in like the you know 70 to 75 in all three categories range, that might be a better fit. Um, but I haven't looked at the data enough to really say definitively on that. Um, the bigger thing is I would say, um, uh, you know Joe Black, with his low stamina and you having him on a pitch count like that. Um, I worry that you're putting too much pressure on your bullpen, when you're not putting in much points. Of Not that that's a mistake, but I would say I'd rather have. First of all, I think with the 1962 settings, I think you can get away with a longer leash. I don't think you have to put such a low pitch count on the guy. Um, but um, uh, yeah, that's why I'd probably lean toward going with Plank as a starter rather than Joe Black as a starter, even with the era setting. But I think if I was going to use Joe Black, I think I'd let him throw more pitches. Um, I feel like your pitch counts kind of across the board are a little low for this era. Like, you can get away with, you might want to put like, 135 on some of the, higher stamina guys. But, they're still going to be ready for the next game. And even a tired Bullet Joe Rogan is going to be better than, the 40 overall guys that you've got in your bullpen.
No, that makes sense. I think the idea I had was that oh the idea I had was that Bullet Joe Rogan, um, well, just in general, like I wanted them to be efficient, but yeah, I get
Right.
cases like this where it's not quite a pitch count problem, but he just got blown out.
Yeah, I mean, that one's not a pitch count problem. It's just, um, yeah, he just got, he's going to get, shelled from time to time.
Yeah,
So, every pitcher in this, current environment, and especially with this environment with increased home runs and increased walks, everybody's going to get shelled a little bit. Um, so yeah, so I mean, that would be the only thing, looking at the pitching is I would probably let the guys pitch more, to not have as much reliance on a bullpen that doesn't have. I mean, for you to have played, would you play 12 games?
yeah, 12 games.
That bullpen, obviously spread out among a number of guys, but they pitched a lot of innings. So, um, yeah, I think I would. Now, actually, looking at the fact that you have that many bullpen guys, I'm confused. Why? why wouldn't you have eliminated a couple of those guys just to leave some open roster spots to hope that James Neal got some of the better roles?
Uh, Good question. I
I feel
think
like
they,
if you have a tinfoil hat theory, you have, at the very least have to be the one following it.
yeah, not always.
Uh,
No, I think what I've been kind of playing around with for the past week is just more of the traditional bullpen setups. So moving away from
okay,
like stopper rolls and middle relief, and uh, like having Nail and QS, and QS more in because of the movement and the stuff suppression.
sure.
Um,
One thing I've noticed in era tournaments is the closer role somehow doesn't get as much use as um, as in modern settings. Um, that I think that that's why I like the stoppers. Um, feel like get used more because that was I don't know if somehow they've set it up because that was what was in vogue at the time, but I really feel like a lot of times closers end up getting less use than you would expect. Um, so I might put a guy like QS that you want to use, put him in a stopper role, put it as like eighth plus, and then and then put a pitch count on there if you want to limit him. But I just think the closer role kind of the AI doesn't like it for some reason.
yeah, and if you just look at the usage doesn't make any sense. Like he came in what was this? Uh,
Like he came in the ninth inning of a game
which
that
game
was a
was
close
this?
game, but
In game two of my round two.
right.
So yeah, probably I need to rethink this because even if we go back and we look at who was it the beaches or the railers, the stopper and a middle reliever, like
Yeah,
maybe I should just go back to one of those, at least for era tournaments.
sure. Um, okay, let's finishing up with your hitting. I just have a couple of things.
Pow pow, that's the name of the game.
So the only thoughts I had is, and I kind of touched on this before, is I feel like I would I don't like the idea of a full punt at center field. Um, and I actually have a way of kind of changing it without changing any of the guys in your team. I would move Benjamin to starting shortstop, and then I would just play George Davis at center field, and then
Ah,
and then and then put Moniak as your backup uh, uh, um, in all the outfield spots, and then I would because I like Davis's bat. I mean, there might be other better options. You could go with Edmonds in center field, especially with power playing up in this format. But um, but just without doing much of anything, just changing things around. And then I would probably, if I'm using Moniak as a backup, I would then get rid of Aquino, who's a 45, and bring in Jimmy Walsh, who plays shorts, can be the backup shortstop to Benjamin for the same amount of points. So I just thought that was a nice little easy way. Aquino really only plays right field, um, and has the power, but I just think using that spot for a guy who kind of plays a lot of positions and it helps you with coverage is more important than even with that power, he's still it's not going to contribute a lot. So I think it'd be better used to especially if you're moving Benjamin to your starting shortstop, you're not going to want Davis, who's playing center field, also backing up shortstop. So that's why I would look to grab now. Do you have Blum?
yeah, I have Blum.
So I guess you could use Blum as your backup shortstop. I think he's a 50 something. But yeah, I just think that I'd want a more versatile player than Aquino, or if you can find a couple points, since Aquino really only plays right field, is might as well upgrade to Elmer Smith, that has similar power but is a much better overall bat.
Right, and I think one of the reasons why I picked Davis was I think some of the other shortstop options that kind of have a bat in that range were just had too little defense. And I guess looking back at the slides, the error rating is not that much more. It's only
No, it's
1.88
only slightly
versus
elevated.
1.73. So like maybe my gotta play decent defenders in historical era settings. I
Right.
kind of miss. I miss. I don't know. Well, you can kind of see. I had that. I had that even set up here. Like I had as a defensive sub, Benchman go in for Davis, and then Davis shift over to center field. Although I don't think that ever happened in a game. Like,
Right.
did that happen here? No, that didn't happen here.
Yeah.
Did that happen here? No, Aquino actually went in to play left field, exactly how I wanted him, and Blum went in to play first.
Okay. Um, and then the only other thing that I would suggest in terms of kind of how you distributed your points is rather than Mauer as 100 at catcher, who has to sit more often, I would probably go down to, um, you know, uh, Ruiz or Hargrove or something like that, and then go with McCovey, who I believe you have. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I think
I mean,
that's true.
you need to find a few points, which I guess getting rid of Aquino would get you most of the way there. Or you could play Aaron Sibiat and Doohan is a little weak for catcher, but also Carlos Santana might not be a bad option in this format for a catcher. Um, I just think with how big we saw, that McCovey's bat is, to have him at first base and then to punt catcher instead of first base would be a better choice. And then that frees up Cavaretta to play right field instead of Aquino, and be the backup first baseman. So that would be the other change that I would consider is in a cap format where I'm limited, I don't usually want to use a lot of points at catcher. Um, and so I like Mauer, but he's not he's not an elite power bat. And so I'd rather get one of my elite power bats in there. Obviously Gehrig if you have, but McCovey we saw was not that big of a drop off.
So Mauer did do well, 160 WRC plus in 11 games, but yeah, he
Sure.
didn't. He if anything, like just shifting him over to first, but like you said, that doesn't make any sense. That
Right.
because I was kind of I wanted to play Mauer for the catcher ability for the catcher arm. Um, Even though I think if go back to the stats, the stolen base attempts are about the same. The stolen base percentage is about the same. So, yeah, it was me hoping for a PGH Beaches esque bulldoze everyone, and the off days will appear. But
Yeah, the
uh,
problem is catcher just you need off days so much. Like you often are already need an off day for catcher. Sometimes game 3 even. So it's like even if you bulldoze, um, you're still pretty early on having to get a game off from your starting catcher, and so that's why you know I definitely, because let's see, you played 12 games and you got eight starts out of Mauer, and he pinch hit in a few of the games that he didn't start. But still, you probably would have gotten at least a couple more games out of McCovey, and with power playing up, I just feel like that might be the better play.
yep, yeah, that makes sense.
And if you didn't want to go all the way to McCovey, there's still a lot of big time power. I mean, you could even go up, only to 81 to the new Jack Clark. what might be a good option. Then you have some points to spread around a few other places and maybe get some, upgrade some spots. Add Eddie Plank or something like that to the either the fifth spot or the bullpen. So I just think that kind of frees you up a little bit and gets some more power production.
Makes sense. Okay,
Okay.
so there's one last thing that we want to touch on. If I go back and do this, tournaments.
So this is just I showed this a couple weeks ago. I've updated it through week 13. This is just a list of who's finished in the top 10 of weekly tournaments the most times, and then I've got one of these for each of the 4 formats, and then we'll look at a combined one looking at all 4 top 10 together. So this was weeklies, dailies. Obviously, Red Eclipse is dominating. It is unbelievable that he's I guess, or she has been top 10 all 13 weeks. That's really amazing consistency, and has been top 3 almost all of those weeks. That's really an impressive run.
Perfect draft.
Perfect draft for dailies. It's a little bit harder. You're playing a lot less tournaments. Weeklies, most people are playing 18 to 21 tournaments. Dailies, people are playing 3 to 60. Whereas perfect draft dailies, most people are playing only 10 to 12. So it's a lot harder to be consistent. And so you see a lot less people making the top 10 on a regular basis. And then when we go to weeklies,
I just want to say thanks for expanding this to include me at the bottom there.
Well, thank you for sliding into the top 10 this week. So you made the cutoff at 3, because I was definitely cutting it off with the people who had made 3. If you'd finished 11th, I would not have been able to. And then you see for weeklies, there's very few people that have even done it twice. Wow, no Mr. Audit account in the Perfect Draft Weekly top 10s?
I think Mr. Audit needs another license to play PD Weeklies.
And so then the last slide of this part is the combined. I think Mr. Audit has 2 different teams on here.
Yep.
A lot of good teams.
And then what's this one?
So this next one is the highest weekly point total in tournament weekly and daily. So I have the highest week with 138 points, and then not surprising that the Palatine Plutos and Underground Turtle Bears have all of the top. And if you go down farther, like to top 10 or 15, it's basically those 2 teams have almost all of the the top spots in daily tournaments. And then for perfect drafts, this looking at the high points is basically the Mr. Audit slide. We have the 2 highest. Actually, I had that reversed. So the 2 highest daily point totals at the top, and then the highest weekly point total is the bottom, with I guess a third alt that was heretofore unknown.
We were gonna, instead of breaking down low caps, we were gonna break down Mr. Audit's teams, but we figured that's.
But I'm confused. He always posts that he's losing in the first round on a tiebreaker. I don't understand how he's finishing all these top 10s when he keeps on losing the tiebreaker? It doesn't make any sense.
Who knows? That's a mystery.
It is a mystery. Maybe we'll have to do an episode where we bring him on and he can show us how all the first round losses equal finishing in the top 10 all the time.
So, thanks for putting this together. I think this is a really neat way to kind of see participation and the dominant performances throughout the year. But yeah,
Yeah, so I'm gonna keep on tracking these categories, and then I have, as we get more data, I'll probably start to add a few different categories, and um, uh, maybe not show all of these different categories every week, but maybe come back to some of them every couple of weeks and bring in some new ones. Um, if anybody has any questions about any of the charts for the top tens or the high points, feel free to DM me, and I can give you some more details. But I think that's it for this week. Thanks, Exto, for hosting and presenting your roster for my critique.
yeah. I hope to have a deep run on this Saturday overnight under the covers cap with your sage wisdom.
Well,
Sweet.
thank you, and thank you everybody for watching us on a Monday night. And I hope you enjoyed your drops, and I hope you learned a little bit about low cap tournaments. And have a good night, everybody.